Hello, I'm Dr. Gabrielle Heffernan. I'm the Assistant Curator of Designated Collections at Hull Museums, and I'm also an Egyptologist. I'm here at Hands on History, where I'm going to be talking about the Egyptian collections as part of our Spotlight On season. Today I'm going to talk to you about hieroglyphs, which is something I get asked about quite a lot. Now obviously hieroglyphs are the written language of the ancient Egyptians, and we see them in tombs, on temples, and on quite a lot of the objects that we have in our museums. The ancient Egyptians believed that hieroglyphs were given to them by the gods. So they believed that they were created by the gods, or one god in particular, the god Thoth. And Thoth was an ibis or a bird-headed god, and he was a god of wisdom and a god of writing. And the Egyptians believed that he had created writing and then he had given it to humans to use. So for them, it had quite a divine quality. It was a gift of the gods. Our earliest knowledge of Egyptian hieroglyphs, or what we think are Egyptian hieroglyphs, comes from the late 4th millennium BC, so about 5,000 years ago. And we have found small ivory and bone tags in tombs. And on these tags, which are attached to containers, are a small number of pictorial signs. And it's likely that what these pictorial signs are a very early form of what over the next few hundred years became the fully formed hieroglyphic system that we are now familiar with. And they told us what was in the jars, or where the objects in the jars came from. So how do we read hieroglyphs? Well, obviously in the few minutes I have here, I can't tell you exactly how to read them. But by using this funerary cone from our collection, I'm just going to show you a few little things about how we read hieroglyphs and how they were written. Funerary cones were objects that were placed above tombs. So they were placed above the door to a tomb, and stamped on them were details of the owner of the tomb. And the idea with funerary cones was that visitors to the tomb would be able to see them, read them, and know who the owner of the tomb was. The first thing to note, I think, is that hieroglyphs are an alphabetic language. So much though I'm sure we'd all like to read them as cat, water, dog, house, that's not actually how we read them. They're an alphabet. They spell out words in a very similar way to our language today. Now, obviously that's a slight oversimplification, but that is how we read them. If we look at this funerary cone, you can see that it's in columns. The texts are in 4 columns. Hieroglyphs could be written in rows or in columns. Often it was an aesthetic decision based on the space that was there to create the text in. They can also be read from right to left or from left to right, but there is a trick for this. So if you look at the humans in the hieroglyphs, so the images of people or of animals, they will face in the direction that the hieroglyphs started. So on this funerary cone, if you look at this image of a person, a kneeling person, he is facing to the left. And that means that the hieroglyphs start in the left-hand column. And that is how we know where to start when we're reading them. Now, as I said, hieroglyphs are an alphabetic language. So I'm going to pull out just a couple of words in these texts, just to show you how they work. So the first is this column here. And this column, if we look right at the top, you can see an image of a hand. And the hand is simply the letter D. Below it, we have a wiggly line. Now a wiggly line represents water, but again, it is a letter, it's the letter N. And then again below this, we have what looks like an oval. This is a mouth. Now it's a very simplified image of a mouth, but it is a mouth. And that again is a letter, it's the letter R. And then right down near the bottom, we have a small jar, and this jar is the letter G. So what we have are the letters D, N, R, and G, and they spell out the name of the tomb owner. Now, as you've probably noticed, there aren't any vowels. Egyptian hieroglyphs don't have vowels in them, so it can make it a little hard to pronounce. So what we do is we add e's in to help us pronounce it. So instead of trying to say Dunrug, we say Denreg, and that's the name of the tomb owner. He's called Denreg. So that's quite a simple alphabetic word that you can spell out very easily and understand. The second couple of signs I'm going to show you are the 2 in this column. The top sign, as you can see, is a leg with a foot on it, and then on top of the leg there's a jar of water tipped over and then pouring water down over the foot. Now this again is an alphabetic sign, but it's more than one letter, and we read it as Wab. And a Wab was a type of priest. So this is giving the title of the tomb owner. So What this is to say, you could spell it out, but this specific sign is pronounced wab. The sign below it is a slightly odd looking sign. It actually represents the sky. And this is pronounced keri. And this means high or above. So what we have here is that the Tuma Nadenreg was a high wab priest. So that was his job, his title. Now, as you can see from these signs, as I say, they're not specific letters, they're groups of letters, and they represent whole words. But they're still, in a sense, alphabetic. So the words don't mean foot and sky, but they do represent full words. And if you look at what they mean, there is actually a link between what the image shows and what the word means. So if we particularly look at the word for high, that's, as I've said, an image of the sky. Well, the sky is high, the sky is above us. So there is a link between what the word means and what the word actually shows. So, as you can see, hieroglyphs are quite a complex alphabetic language, and they do have a very complex grammatical system as well. So, as I say, they are in many ways very similar to our language, but there is also a link between the images and what they meant. And hieroglyphs did have this symbolic power. The Egyptians, as I said, believed that they were a gift from the gods. So while hieroglyphs were a practical language and they were used for many different reasons, they always retained that symbolic and divine meaning. And so the Egyptians used them, they respected them, but at times they did also fear them. If you want to come and discover the collections for yourselves, Hands on History is open on the 2nd and the 4th Saturday of every month.